Picture a room at midnight. The world outside has gone quiet. And here, in this stillness, a question surfaces. Why do some people seem untouched by guilt? In 1513, Niccolò Machiavelli wrote one sentence that would echo for 500 years. It is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. He was describing what we now call the Dark Triad. People who can perform kindness without feeling it, who can simulate empathy without experiencing it, who can harm without guilt and sleep soundly, not because they are evil, because they are wired differently. Tonight, we are going to understand how, not just occasionally, not just in small moments of selfishness that we all have, but consistently, deeply, as if the weight that bends most of us simply does not reach them. You have probably met someone like this. Someone who could hurt you and sleep soundly. Someone who took what they needed and never looked back. Someone whose apology, if it came at all, felt hollow, rehearsed, strategic. And afterward, you were left with a strange confusion. Not just pain, but a kind of disorientation, as if the rules you thought everyone followed turned out to be optional for them. Tonight, we are going to sit with that confusion, not to judge, not to diagnose strangers from a distance, but to understand, because understanding is the lantern that turns fear into clarity. There is a framework in psychology called the Dark Triad, 3 overlapping traits that show up in people who move through the world differently. Narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. These are not insults. They are patterns, measurable, observable, studied for decades. And while most people exist on a spectrum, we all have moments of self-focus, occasional manipulation, fleeting callousness. Some people live at the far edge of that spectrum, where empathy functions differently, where guilt is quiet or absent, where other people become tools, mirrors, or obstacles. This is not a horror story. It is a map. By the end of tonight, you will understand how these patterns work, how charm can exist without warmth, how someone can know your feelings without feeling them, how a person can cause harm and never carry the weight of it, and more importantly, you will understand how to recognize these patterns early, how to protect yourself without paranoia, how to set boundaries without anger, because the goal is not to become afraid of people. The goal is to become wise about them. So let your breath slow. Let the room settle around you. We are going to move through this carefully, with calm, with clarity, with compassion for yourself. And somewhere along the way, if sleep finds you, let it. The parts that matter will stay with you. Let us begin. Chapter 2, Dark Triad, the core pattern. In 2002, 2 researchers named Delroy Paulhus and Kevin Williams published a paper that changed how psychology understood difficult people. They were not studying evil. They were studying a pattern. They found that 3 personality traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, often appeared together. Not always in the same person, not always in equal measure, but frequently enough to form a cluster, a triad. And here is what made it significant. Each trait on its own could be explained. Narcissism, an inflated self-image, a hunger for admiration. Machiavellianism, strategic manipulation, emotional detachment in pursuit of goals. Psychopathy, fearlessness, impulsivity, shallow emotional range. But together, they created something more coherent, a way of being in the world that prioritized the self above all else. Not through aggression, often through charm. Not through chaos, often through calm calculation. This is the part most people miss. When we hear dark psychology, we picture villains, monsters, outliers, people who are nothing like us. But the Dark Triad is not about extremes. It is about a different operating system. Imagine 2 people walking through the same crowded room. One person feels the emotional temperature. They notice when someone is uncomfortable, when a joke lands wrong, when the energy shifts. Their nervous system picks up signals constantly. It is exhausting sometimes. The other person sees only strategy. Who can help them? Who holds power? Who is vulnerable? They are not cruel. They are simply unburdened by the emotional noise. Neither is lying about what they experience. They are just experiencing different things. And this is where the confusion begins. Because when you interact with someone high in Dark Triad traits, you assume they feel what you feel. You assume that when you are hurt, they register it the way you would. You assume that guilt will arrive eventually, that reflection will happen, that remorse will surface. But for them, the mechanism that generates those feelings works differently, or quietly, or not at all. This does not make them inhuman. It makes them different, and that difference has consequences. One researcher described it this way. Imagine a pilot flying a plane with no fuel gauge. They can still navigate. They can still land, but they have no internal signal telling them when they are running low. For someone low in empathy or guilt, other people's pain is like that missing gauge. They know it exists intellectually. They can see it on your face, but they do not feel the pull to stop, to repair, to change course. And so they keep flying, not because they want to harm you, but because nothing inside them says stop. Let your shoulders drop for a moment. Just notice the air moving through you. This is not about making you afraid. It is about helping you see clearly, because once you understand the pattern, you stop taking it personally. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" you start asking, what system am I dealing with? And that question changes everything. Chapter 3. Charm without conscience. There is a reason the most dangerous people are often the most charming. Charm is a strategy, and when empathy is low, charm becomes efficient. Think of someone you have met who had this quality. They walked into a room and the energy shifted. People leaned in, laughed easily, felt special in their presence, and you felt it too. But then, slowly, something else emerged, a coldness behind the warmth, a transactional edge to their kindness, a sense that you are being studied, not seen. This is what researchers call instrumental charm. It is not that the person is faking all of it. Charm feels good to them too. It works, it opens doors, but it is not rooted in connection, it is rooted in outcome. A person high in Dark Triad traits learns early that charm is currency, that a smile, a compliment, a moment of focused attention can get them what they need. And because they are not burdened by the emotional cost of performing, they can sustain it longer than most. You feel drained after an hour of small talk at a party. They feel energized because they were never really connecting. They were hunting, not for prey. That is too dramatic, for opportunity. Here is a small story. A woman once told me about a colleague at work. Brilliant, charismatic, everyone loved him. He remembered birthdays, asked about your weekend, made you feel important. But over time, she noticed a pattern. He only showed up when he needed something. A favor, a connection, a cover for a mistake. And when the ask was fulfilled, he disappeared. Not rudely, just gone. She confronted him once, gently. He apologized beautifully, took full responsibility, promised to do better. And for 2 weeks, he did. Then the pattern resumed. Because the apology was also a strategy. People high in Machiavellianism in particular are masters of this. They can mirror your emotional language. They can say what you need to hear. But the words are not connected to internal change. They are connected to external goals. Fix the relationship so it remains useful. This does not mean they are evil. It means they have optimized for survival in a different way than you have. You optimized for belonging, for trust, for depth. They optimized for leverage, for flexibility, for outcome. Neither is inherently superior. But when the two systems collide, yours breaks first, because you are playing for connection, and they are playing for advantage. The question is not, how do I fix them? The question is, how do I stop expecting them to play by rules they never agreed to? Let the next breath come a little slower. Feel the weight of your hands where they rest. You are learning to see, and seeing is the first step towards safety. Chapter 4. Empathy, cognitive versus affective. Empathy is not one thing. It is two systems running in parallel. And in people high in Dark Triad traits, one system works perfectly. The other is dim or silent. The first system is called cognitive empathy. This is the ability to understand what someone else is thinking or feeling, to read a room, to predict reactions, to know what words will land. It is a skill, a tool, and it can be sharpened. The second system is affective empathy. This is the ability to feel what someone else is feeling, to wince when you see pain, to tear up when someone cries, to carry the emotional weight of another person's experience as if it were your own. Most people have both. You can read that your friend is sad. That is cognitive empathy, and you feel a tug in your chest. That is affective empathy. But someone high in Dark Triad traits often has only the first. They can see that you are hurt. They can even name it accurately, better than you can, sometimes. But they do not feel the pull to soothe it, to repair it, to stop doing the thing that caused it. This is the mechanism that makes manipulation possible. Because if you can read someone's emotions without feeling them, you can use them. A person with high cognitive empathy and low affective empathy is like a musician who can read sheet music but feels no joy in the song. They know exactly which notes to play to make you cry, but they do not cry with you. Here is where it gets subtle. This does not mean they cannot care about you. It means they care differently. They might care about you the way you care about a favorite tool. Useful, valuable, worth maintaining, but not sacred, not irreplaceable. One researcher described a conversation with someone diagnosed with psychopathy. She asked him if he loved his partner. He said yes, absolutely. She asked what that felt like. He paused, then said, "I want her to be happy. I want to keep her. I would protect her." She asked, "But do you feel her pain when she is hurting?" Another pause. "No, but I know I should act like I do." That is the gap. He knew the script. He could perform care convincingly, but the felt experience, the ache, the urgency, the inability to rest until she was okay was absent. And so his love was real to him, functional, genuine in its way, but it was not the same love you would give. This is why people who have been close to someone with Dark Triad traits often say the same thing. "I felt like I was always auditioning," because you were. Affective empathy creates unconditional presence. Cognitive empathy creates conditional performance. And when you are raised in a world that values the first, encountering the second feels like a betrayal. But it is not personal. It is structural. Their system was built differently. And once you see that, you stop asking them to feel what they cannot feel. You start asking, what do I need to feel safe around this system? Take one slow breath. Notice where your body feels heavy. You are not broken for expecting empathy, but you are wiser now for understanding its limits. Chapter 5. Guilt, How It's Built. Guilt is not a feeling you are born with. It is something you learn. A child reaches for a toy that belongs to another child. The other child cries. The adult says, "Look, you made them sad. How do you feel?" And the child feels something. A tightness, a pulling back, an internal alarm. That alarm is guilt. It is the nervous system registering, "I caused harm. I need to repair this." And over time, that alarm becomes automatic. You do not need someone to point it out. You feel it on your own. You snap at someone you love. The guilt arrives before they respond. You lie about something small. The guilt hums underneath the words. This is how most people are wired. The alarm is loud, persistent, uncomfortable, and the only way to turn it off is to repair, to apologize, to change. But not everyone develops that alarm, or rather, not everyone develops it at the same volume. For someone high in Dark Triad traits, the alarm is faint or absent. They can see that they caused harm. Cognitively, they understand. I said something hurtful. They are upset now. And, I said, but the internal discomfort, the tug that says, "Fix this," does not arrive. And so they continue, not because they are monsters, because nothing inside them says stop. Researchers have studied this for decades. They put people in MRI machines, show them images of others in pain. In most brains, the areas associated with empathy and distress light up immediately. In people high in psychopathy, those areas stay dim. The brain is processing the image. It knows what it is seeing, but it does not generate the emotional response that would create guilt. It is like watching a fire alarm go off in another building. You see the lights, you hear the sound, but you do not feel the urgency to evacuate, because it is not your building. For someone low in guilt, other people's pain is always in another building. This is not cruelty. Cruelty requires intent, pleasure in harm, a desire to see someone suffer. This is indifference. And indifference is quieter, harder to name, easier to mistake for something else. Here is a small example. A man forgets his partner's birthday. When she expresses hurt, he says, "I was busy. It is not a big deal." She says, "It is a big deal to me." He shrugs. "Okay, I will do better next year." No apology. No recognition of her pain. Just a plan to avoid future conflict. Because to him, the harm is theoretical. He knows she is upset. He can see it. But he does not feel the pull to soothe her, to sit with her disappointment, to carry any of it. And so he moves on, while she is left holding all the emotional weight alone. This is what it feels like to interact with someone whose guilt mechanism is quiet. You keep waiting for them to feel bad, to realize, to soften, to reach for repair, and they never do. Not because they do not care about you, but because the signal that says, "I hurt someone I care about," never reaches the volume it would need to change their behavior. Let your jaw soften. Let the tension in your neck release just slightly. This is hard to sit with, because it means that some people will hurt you and never lose sleep over it. Not out of malice, out of structure. And once you see that, you stop waiting for them to change. You start changing how you engage. Chapter 6: Shame, Remorse, Regret. Guilt has siblings: shame, remorse, regret. They are often used interchangeably, but they are not the same. And in people high in Dark Triad traits, they show up differently, or not at all. Guilt says, "I did something bad." Shame says, "I am something bad." Guilt is about behavior. Shame is about identity. Most people feel both. You lie to a friend. Guilt says, "That was wrong." Shame says, "I am a liar." And shame is heavier, louder, harder to repair. But it is also what keeps most people from repeating harmful patterns, because shame is unbearable. And so you course correct, you apologize, you change, not because you want to, because you have to, because the weight of shame makes it impossible to stay the same. People high in narcissism in particular have a complicated relationship with shame. They feel it intensely, but instead of processing it, they defend against it. They cannot sit with the possibility that they are flawed, that they made a mistake, that they are ordinary. And so when shame arrives, they do not internalize it. They externalize it. It becomes your fault, the situation's fault, the world's fault, never theirs. This is why narcissistic people rarely apologize genuinely, because a real apology requires sitting with shame, saying, "I was wrong, I hurt you, I am flawed." And for someone whose entire identity is built on being special, admired above others, that is unbearable. So instead, they offer what looks like an apology. "I am sorry you feel that way. I am sorry if I hurt you. I am sorry, but you also." These are not apologies, they are evasions. Because the apology that heals is the one that says, "I did this, I own it, I will change." And that sentence requires the ability to tolerate shame, which brings us to remorse. Remorse is guilt plus sorrow. It is not just, "I did something wrong." It is, "I feel deep sadness that I caused harm." Remorse softens you, makes you want to weep, to undo, to never do it again. It is the feeling that drives genuine change. But remorse requires affective empathy. You have to feel the other person's pain as if it were your own. You have to carry the weight of what you did. And for someone high in Dark Triad traits, that weight does not arrive. They might feel regret. Regret is cognitive, strategic. It says, I wish I had not done that because now I am facing consequences. A person high in Machiavellianism might regret lying to you, not because they feel bad about betraying your trust, but because now you do not trust them, and that makes future manipulation harder. The regret is real, but it is self-focused. They are not sorry they hurt you. They are sorry they got caught. This distinction matters because when you are waiting for someone to feel remorse, you are waiting for a mechanism they do not have. They can feel regret. They can adjust strategy. But they cannot feel the deep, soul-level sorrow that changes a person from the inside. And so the pattern continues. With small modifications, better performances, more careful lies, but no fundamental shift, because the internal alarm that says never again is silent. Notice the weight of your body where it rests. Let your next breath be easy, soft. This is not about condemning anyone. It is about seeing clearly. So you stop expecting water from a stone. Chapter 7, Moral Emotions, Off Switch. There is a term in psychology, moral emotions. These are the feelings that guide ethical behavior. Guilt, shame, empathy, compassion. They are not thoughts. They are felt experiences. And for most people, they act like guardrails. You consider lying. Guilt whispers, do not. You consider taking something that is not yours. Shame rises. You see someone suffering. Compassion pulls you toward them. These emotions are automatic, involuntary. You do not choose to feel guilt when you hurt someone. It just arrives. And it keeps arriving until you repair the harm. This is the system that makes morality possible. Without moral emotions, morality becomes purely intellectual, a set of rules, a social contract, something you follow when it is convenient, when you might get caught, but not something you feel. And this is what happens in people high in Dark Triad traits. The switch that activates moral emotions is dim or off. They can learn the rules. They can follow them when it benefits them. But they do not feel the pull to follow them when no one is watching. One researcher described it as the difference between knowing stealing is wrong and feeling stealing is wrong. A child knows stealing is wrong because adults said so. An adult feels stealing is wrong because taking someone's hard-earned money creates harm, and that harm creates an internal discomfort that must be avoided. The feeling is what sustains ethical behavior over time. But what if you never developed that feeling? Then morality becomes a game. You follow the rules when they serve you. You bend them when you can get away with it. You break them when the reward outweighs the risk. Not because you are evil, because the internal cost of breaking them is zero. This is why people high in psychopathy in particular can commit harm so calmly. There is no internal storm, no wrestling, no sleepless night. They made a calculation. The calculation said, "This benefits me more than it costs me." And they acted, and afterward they slept fine, because the mechanism that generates moral distress never activated. Here is the strange part. This can make them effective in certain roles. A surgeon who can cut into a body without emotional turmoil. A CEO who can fire hundreds without losing sleep. A soldier who can follow orders without questioning. Low moral emotion can be adaptive in small doses, in specific contexts, but in relationships it is devastating. Because relationships require the ability to feel the cost of your actions on another person, to know deeply that your words landed like stones, to carry that knowing until you repair it. And if you cannot feel that cost, the relationship becomes one-sided. One person carrying all the emotional labor. The other person coasting, taking, optimizing, and over time, the person who feels too much burns out, while the person who feels too little wonders what the problem is. Let your shoulders drop again. Just for a moment. You are safe here, and you are learning something important. Not everyone experiences morality the way you do, and that is not your failure to communicate. It is a structural difference you cannot fix. Chapter 8, Narcissism, the Mirror World. Narcissism is the most misunderstood trait in the Dark Triad. People hear the word and think, someone who loves themselves too much. But that is not quite right. A narcissist does not love themselves. They love the reflection, and there is a difference. Imagine a person standing in front of a mirror. The reflection is flawless, admired, special. They spend hours polishing that reflection, curating it, protecting it, presenting it to the world. But step away from the mirror, and the image disappears. And without the reflection, they feel empty, because the self they built is not internal. It is external, dependent, fragile. This is the paradox of narcissism. From the outside, it looks like supreme confidence, grandiosity, self-assurance, unshakable belief in their own superiority. But underneath, there is a deep, unspoken terror. The terror of being ordinary, of being seen clearly and found unremarkable. And so the narcissist builds a fortress, not to protect themselves from harm, to protect themselves from truth. They surround themselves with people who reflect back the image they need. Admirers, validators, mirrors, and anyone who threatens that image with criticism, with honesty, with indifference, becomes an enemy. Not because they hate you, because you broke the spell. One psychologist described narcissism as a castle built on sand. From a distance, it looks magnificent, but the foundation is unstable. One wave and it crumbles. And the narcissist knows this, not consciously, but somewhere deep, and so they spend their entire life shoring up the walls with achievements, with status, with admiration. But it is never enough, because the emptiness they are trying to fill is not about external validation. It is about internal worth, and no amount of applause can fill that void. Here is a small story. A man once told me about his father. Brilliant, charismatic, everyone admired him, but at home he was different. He needed constant praise, constant reassurance. If dinner was not perfect, he sulked. If a conversation shifted away from him, he redirected it. If anyone in the family succeeded at something, he found a way to diminish it. Not cruelly, just subtly. A comment, a joke, a reminder of his own superior achievement, because he could not tolerate anyone else shining brighter. Not because he did not love his family, but because their light made his field dimmer, and that was unbearable. So he dimmed theirs instead. This is what narcissism does in relationships. It turns love into a transaction. You exist to reflect, to admire, to validate. And when you stop, the love stops. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. You become furniture, background, irrelevant, until you resume your role, and then the warmth returns, as if nothing happened, because to them, nothing did. You stopped being useful. Then you became useful again. The relationship resumed, but for you, something broke, because you realize you were never loved for who you are. You were loved for what you reflected. Let your jaw soften. Let the next breath move through you without effort. This is hard, but it is also clarity. And clarity, even when it hurts, is better than confusion. Chapter 9. Grandiosity and fragility. There are two faces of narcissism. The first is grandiose, loud, confident, magnetic. The person who walks into a room and commands attention, who talks about their achievements without hesitation, who believes deeply that they are exceptional. This is the narcissism most people recognize, but there is a second face. Vulnerable narcissism. Quiet, sensitive, easily wounded. The person who believes they are special but feels perpetually misunderstood, who withdraws when criticized, who nurses resentment silently. Both types share the same core belief. I am different. I am more. I deserve more. But they express it differently. Grandiose narcissists perform their superiority. Vulnerable narcissists protect it. And both are fragile. because their sense of self is not grounded in anything stable. It is grounded in comparison, in validation, in being seen as more. And the moment that validation stops, the self crumbles. This is why narcissistic people react so intensely to criticism, not because the criticism is harsh, but because it threatens the entire structure. You point out a small mistake. They hear, "You are ordinary. You are flawed. You are nothing." And they cannot sit with that. So they defend with anger, with denial, with blame, or they withdraw entirely. Shut down, go cold, punish you with silence. Because engaging with the criticism would mean acknowledging the flaw, and acknowledging the flaw would shatter the image. One researcher called this narcissistic fragility, the idea that beneath the grandiosity is not strength but brittleness, a confidence so thin that the slightest pressure cracks it. And when it cracks, the response is not sadness, it is rage. Here is the mechanism. Most people, when criticized, feel guilt or shame. They think, maybe I was wrong, maybe I need to change. And they sit with that discomfort until they can integrate it. But someone with narcissistic traits cannot sit with it, because their entire identity is built on being right, being superior, being beyond reproach. So instead of internalizing the criticism, they reject it, and they reject you for giving it. You become the problem, not because they hate you, but because you destabilize the world they built, and they will do whatever it takes to restabilize it, even if that means rewriting reality, gaslighting, minimizing, reframing. "I never said that. You are too sensitive. You are making this a bigger deal than it is." These are not lies, exactly. They are defensive maneuvers. The narcissist genuinely cannot hold two truths at once. I am special, and I made a mistake. So they choose the first truth and reshape the world to fit it. This is exhausting for the people around them, because you find yourself constantly questioning your own perception. Did that really happen? Am I overreacting? Maybe I am the problem. And over time, you lose trust in yourself, not because they broke you, but because their reality distortion field is so consistent, so confident, that it starts to feel more real than your own experience. Notice where your body touches the surface beneath you. Feel the weight, the pressure, the contact. You are here. You are real. And what you experienced was real, even if they convinced you otherwise. Chapter 10, Validation, Hunger, the Loop. Narcissistic people are always hungry, not for food, for validation. They need to be seen, admired, confirmed, and the need is not occasional. It is constant, like a phone battery that drains overnight. Every morning, it needs recharging, and you are the charger. At first, this can feel good. They pay attention to you, ask questions, remember details. You feel special in their presence. But slowly you realize the attention is not about you. It is about them. They are studying you, learning what you value, what you respond to, so they can become the person you will admire. One woman described it this way. She dated a man for 2 years. In the beginning, he mirrored everything she loved. She loved hiking. Suddenly, he loved hiking. She loved poetry. He quoted Rilke. She valued honesty. He praised her for being so real. It felt like fate, like finding her person. But over time, the mirror cracked. He stopped hiking once she was committed. The poetry disappeared. The honesty became conditional. He was honest when it served him, evasive when it did not. And she realized he had never loved those things. He had loved being loved for performing them. This is the validation loop. The narcissist offers you exactly what you need. You respond with admiration. They feel alive, seen, confirmed, and the loop repeats. But the moment you stop admiring, the loop breaks, and they either escalate, working harder to win you back, or they discard you, moving on to someone who will validate them more easily. Because to them, relationships are not about connection. They are about supply. Narcissistic supply. This is the term psychologists use to describe the admiration, attention, and validation that narcissistic people need to maintain their self-image. And when one source runs dry, they find another. This is why narcissistic people often have a rotation. Old friends, new friends, exes who keep coming back. Not because they are commitment phobic, but because they need multiple mirrors. One person cannot provide enough reflection to sustain the image. And when you understand this, it stops feeling personal. You were never inadequate. You were just one mirror in a room full of them. And mirrors are interchangeable. Here is the difficult truth. You cannot fill the void in a narcissistic person. No matter how much you give, no matter how perfectly you reflect, because the void is not about you. It is about the absence of an internal self, and only they can build that. But most never do, because building an internal self requires sitting with ordinariness, with flaws, with limits, with the reality that you are just one person among billions. And for someone whose entire identity is built on being more, that is unbearable. So they keep hunting for the next source of validation, the next person who will make them feel exceptional. And the loop continues. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tension in your hands release. You were not responsible for filling them. And you are not responsible for the emptiness they carry. Chapter 11. Narcissistic Injury, Cold Rage. There is a moment that reveals a narcissist. It is the moment they are crossed. Not hurt, not criticized gently. Crossed when their authority is questioned, when their image is threatened, when someone says no, that is when the mask slips. And what emerges is not sadness, not vulnerability. It is rage, but not the hot, explosive kind. Cold rage, calculated, controlled, cutting. One man described it this way. He forgot his partner's birthday. She expressed disappointment, calmly, kindly, and he went silent for 3 days. No explanation, no apology, just cold, deliberate absence. When he finally spoke, it was not to repair, it was to punish. You always overreact. I was busy. You are exhausting. The message was clear. How dare you make me feel bad about myself? This is called narcissistic injury. It happens when someone threatens the narcissist's self-image, and the response is not proportional, it is annihilating, because to them, the threat feels existential. You did not just criticize their behavior, you attacked their identity, and they will do whatever it takes to restore the balance, sometimes through overt aggression, yelling, blaming, shaming, sometimes through covert aggression, silent treatment, passive-aggressive comments, triangulation. But always the goal is the same: make you feel small, so I can feel big again. One researcher described narcissistic rage as the emotional equivalent of a cornered animal. When a narcissist feels exposed, they do not process the feeling. They defend against it with all the force they have. And the defense is rarely about the actual issue. You forgot to text back. You disagreed with them in front of others. You succeeded at something they did not. The trigger is small, but the response is massive, because it was never about the text or the disagreement or the success. It was about the feeling of being diminished, and that feeling is intolerable. Here is the part that confuses people. Narcissistic rage is often followed by charm. After the explosion, the flowers arrive, the apology, the promise to change, and you think, maybe they see it now. Maybe this was the wake-up call. And inability, but the charm is not remorse. It is damage control. The rage destabilizes the relationship. The charm restabilizes it, not because they feel bad, but because losing you would destabilize their self-image, and so they pull you back with just enough tenderness to keep you hoping, and the cycle repeats. Injury, rage, charm, repeat, until you realize this is not a relationship. It is a pattern, and patterns do not change unless the person running them wants to change, which requires humility, self-reflection, vulnerability, the very things a narcissist is built to avoid. Notice the air moving through your chest. In, out, steady, reliable. You cannot fix the pattern, but you can stop participating in it. Chapter 12. Machiavellianism, Strategic Self. If narcissism is about the image, Machiavellianism is about the outcome. The narcissist asks, "How do I appear?" The Machiavellian asks, "How do I win?" And winning is not about dominance. It is about control, subtle, strategic, long-term. A person high in Machiavellian traits sees the world as a chessboard. Every interaction is a move. Every person is a piece. Not because they are cruel, because they are pragmatic. Emotions to them are noise, useful sometimes, distracting most of the time. And so they learn to set them aside, to stay calm when others panic, to smile when they are angry, to wait when others rush. This gives them an edge, because while you are feeling, they are calculating. While you are hoping for fairness, they are optimizing for advantage. And in the short term, this works. They rise in organizations. They win negotiations. They get what they want. But in relationships, it is corrosive. Because relationships require vulnerability, the willingness to be seen, to be wrong, to trust. And a Machiavellian person struggles with all three. They cannot be seen because they are always performing. They cannot be wrong because admitting error is a tactical disadvantage. They cannot trust because trust requires believing others will not exploit you. And they would exploit you, so they assume you will too. One researcher described Machiavellianism as cynicism in action, the belief that everyone is selfish. That kindness is just self-interest in disguise, that the only difference between good people and bad people is that good people are better at hiding it. And if everyone is selfish, then the smartest move is to be selfish first, more skillfully, more strategically, before someone does it to you. This is not paranoia. It is a worldview, and once you adopt it, every interaction becomes transactional. You do not give without expecting return. You do not trust without leverage. You do not love without an exit strategy. Here is a small example. A woman once told me about her business partner. Brilliant, reliable, always 2 steps ahead. But she noticed something. He never shared credit. When they succeeded, he framed it as his win. When they failed, he framed it as her mistake. And he did it so smoothly, she did not notice at first. A comment in a meeting, a subtle reframing in an email. Over time, his reputation grew. Hers stagnated. When she confronted him, he smiled. Business is business. If you want credit, take it. And technically, he was right. He had not stopped her from speaking up. He had just positioned himself better. And to him, that was fair. Because fairness to a Machiavellian person is not about equality. It is about who plays the game better. This is what makes Machiavellianism hard to recognize. It is not loud, it is not aggressive. It is quiet, patient, strategic. And by the time you realize you have been outmaneuvered, the damage is done. Let your jaw soften. Let the muscles in your face release. You are not naive for trusting. You are human. And learning to see the game does not mean you have to play it. Chapter 13. Manipulation. Soft power tactics. Manipulation is not always obvious. Sometimes it is loud. Threats, ultimatums, demands. But often it is soft. A question that sounds caring but plants doubt. A compliment that feels good but creates obligation. A story that positions them as the victim and you as the villain. These are soft power tactics, and people high in Machiavellian traits are experts. They have learned that direct force creates resistance. But indirect influence, shaping perception, redirecting attention, creating emotional pressure, works. Because by the time you realize what happened, the decision has already been made, and it feels like your decision. One of the most common tactics is called the double bind. They present two options. Both benefit them. Do you want to do this now or later? Either way, you are doing it. The illusion of choice makes you feel in control, but the outcome was never in question. Another tactic. Strategic helplessness. They claim they cannot do something you know they can do. I am not good with technology. Can you handle this? And you do, because it is easier than arguing. But over time, you realize they are not incapable. They are strategic. They have offloaded the labor, and you accepted it without negotiation. Then there is emotional blackmail, not overt, just a sigh, a comment. I thought you cared about me. After everything I have done for you, I guess I will just handle it myself. Again, the words create a debt, a feeling that you owe them, and the debt is never quite repaid, because they keep moving the goalpost. One woman described it as walking on eggshells made of guilt. She could never do enough. Every act of care was met with, but you did not. Every boundary was met with, I guess I do not matter. And she found herself shrinking, doing more, giving more, apologizing for things that were not her fault. But not because she was weak, but because the manipulation was so subtle, she could not see the pattern until it had already reshaped her. This is the skill of a Machiavellian person. They do not break you. They reshape you, slowly, incrementally, until one day you look up and realize you are living their life, not yours. Making decisions that serve them, not you. And the worst part is, you cannot even pinpoint when it started, because each individual move was small, reasonable, justifiable. It is only in aggregate that the pattern becomes clear, and by then you are already deep in it. Notice the weight of your legs. Feel them resting, heavy, grounded. You are still here, and you can still choose differently. Chapter 14. Gaslighting. Reality rewritten. Gaslighting is not lying. Lying is saying something untrue. Gaslighting is making you question whether truth exists at all. It works like this. Something happens. You remember it clearly. The words they said, the tone, the look on their face. Later, you bring it up, and they look at you with confusion. I never said that. You know they did. You heard it. But they are so certain, so calm. And you start to wonder, did I misunderstand? Did I imagine it? Am I being unfair? That moment, that flicker of doubt, is where gaslighting takes root. Because once you doubt your own perception, you start relying on theirs, and they know this. People high in Dark Triad traits, particularly narcissists and Machiavellians, use gaslighting not out of malice, but out of strategy. If they can make you doubt yourself, you will stop challenging them. You will accept their version of events, even when it contradicts what you saw, what you felt, what you know. Here is a small example. A man tells his partner he's going out with friends. She asks who. He gets defensive. Why do you need to know? Do you not trust me? She backs down, says it is fine. Later, she finds out he lied about where he was. When she confronts him, he does not apologize. He flips it. You are always checking on me. This is why I did not tell you. You make me feel suffocated. Suddenly, the issue is not his lie. It is her need for honesty. And she finds herself apologizing, for asking, for caring, even though he was the one who lied. This is gaslighting, the rewriting of cause and effect, the inversion of responsibility. And it works because it is delivered with absolute confidence. No hesitation, no guilt, just a clear, alternate reality. And when someone presents their version with that much certainty, your version starts to feel unstable, especially if they do it over and over. Over time, you stop trusting yourself. You defer to them, not because they are right, but because arguing takes energy you no longer have. And so their reality becomes the only reality. One researcher described gaslighting as death by 1,000 cuts to your sense of self. Each individual incident is small, deniable, ambiguous, but cumulatively they erode your ability to know what is real. And once that erodes, you become easy to control, not through force, through confusion. Let your shoulders drop. Let the next breath come without effort. What you remember is real. What you felt is valid. And if someone keeps making you question that, the problem is not your perception. It is their need to control it. Chapter 15. Triangulation. Social chess. There is a tactic narcissists and Machiavellians use in relationships. It is called triangulation, and it works like this. You are in a conflict with them. You express frustration, hurt, a need for change. Instead of addressing it directly, they bring in a third party. Well, name does not have a problem with this. Everyone else thinks you are overreacting. I talked to a friend, and they agree with me. Suddenly, it is not just you and them. It is you against them and everyone else. And the weight of that shifts the dynamic, because now you are not just questioning their behavior, you are questioning yourself. If everyone else is fine with it, maybe I am the problem. But here is the truth. Most of the time, the third party does not exist, or they were told a version of the story that makes you look unreasonable, or they were not asked at all. Their name was just used as leverage. Triangulation creates isolation. It makes you feel like the outlier, the difficult one, the one who cannot just go with the flow. And that feeling keeps you compliant, because challenging them means challenging the group, and that is exhausting. Here is a small example. A woman once told me about her mother-in-law. Every time she set a boundary, the mother-in-law would say, "Husband's name does not mind. Why do you?" It positioned her as the problem, the one disrupting the peace. And over time, she stopped setting boundaries, not because they were unreasonable, but because defending them felt like being unreasonable. This is the goal of triangulation: to make you doubt not just your perception, but your right to have needs. And it works because it weaponizes belonging. Humans are wired to seek approval, to fit in, to not rock the boat. And when someone high in Dark Triad traits exploits that wiring, it is devastatingly effective. Another version of triangulation is pitting people against each other. They tell you one thing about someone else. They tell that person something different about you. And suddenly, you and that person are at odds, while they sit back, neutral, concerned, playing peacemaker between two people they deliberately set against each other. This keeps them in control, because as long as you are focused on each other, you are not focused on them, and they can continue doing whatever they want without scrutiny. One researcher called this divide and conquer. It is a strategy as old as power itself, and in relationships, it is quiet, insidious. You do not realize it is happening until you step back and see the pattern, that every conflict somehow leads back to them, that every resolution somehow requires their mediation, that you have become dependent on them to navigate relationships they destabilized in the first place. Notice the air moving through your nose. Cool on the inhale, warm on the exhale. You are safe, and you do not need someone else's approval to trust your own experience. Chapter 16. Psychopathy. Fearless detachment. Psychopathy is the quietest trait in the Dark Triad, and the most misunderstood. People hear the word and think serial killer, monster, violent criminal. But that is Hollywood. The reality is subtler. Psychopathy, in a clinical sense, is a cluster of traits: low anxiety, high impulsivity, shallow emotional range, and most critically, fearlessness. Not the absence of fear in the moment, But the absence of fear as a guiding force, most people are shaped by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being alone. That fear keeps you careful, considerate, connected. But someone high in psychopathy does not feel that pull. They can take risks without the knot in their stomach. They can lie without the racing heart. They can walk away without the ache. This gives them an advantage in certain situations. High-pressure jobs, crisis management, competitive environments. Where others freeze, they move. Where others second-guess, they act. But in relationships, this same trait creates distance, because relationships require vulnerability, the willingness to be hurt, to care enough that loss would matter, and someone low in fear does not experience that vulnerability. They can care, but it does not feel urgent. They can commit, but it does not feel binding. They can leave, and it does not feel devastating. One researcher described psychopathy as emotional life played on mute. The experiences are there, but the volume is low. They know what sadness is, but they do not sink into it. They know what love is, but they do not lose themselves in it. They know what guilt is, but it does not echo, and so they move through life unencumbered by regret, by attachment, by the invisible threads that bind most people to their choices. Here is a small story. A man once described his brother: charming, intelligent, successful. But there was always something off. When their mother died, his brother cried at the funeral. But the next day, he was fine, planning, organizing, moving forward. No long nights of grief, no breakdowns, no lingering sadness, just competence. And the man wondered, did he not love her? But that was not it. He did love her, in his way. But the grief did not linger. It moved through him like weather, acknowledged, felt briefly, released, and then he returned to baseline. This is what low emotional depth looks like. Not cruelty, not coldness, just a shallower reservoir. Feelings come, feelings go, but they do not reshape the landscape. And for people around them, this can feel like abandonment, because you are drowning in emotion, and they are standing on the shore, calm, wondering why you do not just swim, not because they do not care, but because the water does not feel deep to them. Let your hands rest where they are. No need to move them. Just let them be. This is not about judging. It is about seeing that some people are wired differently, and expecting them to feel what you feel is like expecting a colorblind person to see red. They cannot. It is not a choice. Chapter 17. Low anxiety. The quiet edge. Anxiety is a teacher. It tells you when something is wrong, when a risk is too high, when trust has been broken. It keeps you safe, but it also keeps you careful, hesitant, second-guessing, overthinking. And someone high in psychopathy does not have that teacher. Their baseline anxiety is low, almost imperceptibly low, which means they take risks that would paralyze most people. Not recklessly, strategically, because without the internal alarm, they can evaluate risk purely on logic. No emotional override. No gut feeling saying, stop. Just calculation. This is why people high in psychopathy often succeed in high-stakes environments. They can make decisions under pressure without freezing. They can negotiate without fear of rejection. They can cut losses without sentimentality. And in business, in leadership, in crisis, this is powerful. But in relationships, it creates asymmetry. Because you are anxious about whether they care, whether you matter, whether this will last. And they are not. They are present when it serves them, absent when it does not, and they do not lose sleep over it. One woman described dating someone like this. He was calm, steady, unshakable. At first, it felt like security. But over time, she realized he was not calm because he was confident in the relationship. He was calm because he was not attached to it. If it ended, he would be fine. Not out of strength, out of indifference. And that realization was crushing, because she had mistaken his lack of anxiety for love, when really it was just a lack of anxiety. Here is the mechanism. Anxiety, in healthy doses, binds people together. You worry about hurting someone you love, so you are careful. You worry about losing them, so you invest. You worry about being alone, so you repair when things break. But without that worry, the relationship becomes optional, a preference, not a necessity. And when it stops being convenient, it stops. No drama, no explanation, just a quiet exit. Because there is no internal alarm saying, stay, fight, repair. There is only logic, and logic says, this is not working. Move on. One researcher described it as the absence of emotional inertia. Most people carry the momentum of relationships. Even after a breakup, the feelings linger, the habits remain. It takes time to disentangle, but someone high in psychopathy can cut cleanly. No looking back, no wondering, no second guessing. They made the decision. And they are done. And for the person left behind, it feels inhuman. How can you care one day and not care the next? But to them, it is not inhuman. It is just efficient. Notice the rise and fall of your chest, the rhythm, the constancy. You are not too anxious. You are human, and your anxiety is trying to protect you, even when it feels overwhelming. Chapter 18. impulse, and thrill seeking. People high in psychopathy are drawn to novelty, to risk, to stimulation, not because they are adventurous, but because they are easily bored. The baseline emotional state for most people is neutral. Content, calm, occasionally happy, occasionally sad. But for someone high in psychopathy, neutral feels empty, flat, dull, unbearable, and so they chase intensity, adrenaline, conflict, drama, not because they enjoy chaos, but because it makes them feel alive. One man described it this way: he could not sit still, not physically, emotionally. A stable relationship felt suffocating. A steady job felt pointless. He needed change, movement, unpredictability. And so he created it. He started fights when things were calm. He quit jobs when they became routine. He ended relationships when they felt too safe. Not because he wanted to destroy things, but because stability felt like death and intensity felt like life. This is what high impulsivity looks like: a need for immediate gratification, an inability to delay reward, a restlessness that cannot be soothed by routine. And in relationships, this is destabilizing, because you are trying to build something, to create trust, to deepen intimacy, to settle into safety, and they are sabotaging it. Not consciously, not maliciously, but because safety feels like stagnation, and stagnation is unbearable. One researcher described psychopathy as living in the present with no anchor to the future. Most people make decisions with consequences in mind. If I do this, what will happen tomorrow? Next year? In 10 years? But someone high in psychopathy struggles with future orientation. The future is abstract, theoretical. The present is real, and so they act on what feels good now, without weighing the cost later. This is why they can lie so easily. The lie solves an immediate problem. The consequence, being caught losing trust, is too distant to generate discomfort. And so they lie, and lie again. Not because they are pathological, but because the immediate payoff outweighs the abstract cost. Here is a small example. A woman once told me about her ex-husband. He cheated multiple times. Each time he promised to stop. Each time he meant it. But within weeks he would do it again. Not because he did not love her, but because in the moment when the opportunity arose, the temptation was immediate, and the promise was just words. Abstract, distant, weightless. And so the promise lost every time. This is what low impulse control does. It makes intentions meaningless. Because intention requires holding a future goal in mind while resisting a present temptation. And that requires a mechanism they do not have. Let your body rest where it is. No need to adjust, just notice. Impulsivity is not the same as malice, but the harm it causes is real, and you do not have to keep forgiving it. Chapter 19. Callousness, the emotional flatline. Callousness is not cruelty. Cruelty requires intent, pleasure in harm. Callousness is something quieter. It is indifference, the ability to witness suffering without feeling pulled to stop it. Most people, when they see someone in pain, feel something, a tightness, a pull, an urge to help. It is automatic, involuntary. You see a child crying, and your chest tightens. You see someone struggling, and you lean in. This is effective empathy, the body responding to another's distress as if it were your own. But someone high in psychopathy does not have that response, or they have it faintly. They can see that you are suffering. They can understand it intellectually, but they do not feel it, and so they do not act, not because they want you to suffer, but because nothing inside them says intervene. One woman described this with her partner. She was going through a difficult time, grief, overwhelm, exhaustion. She told him clearly, directly, and he listened. But then, nothing. No comfort, no check-ins, no adjustment to his behavior. Just neutrality, as if she had told him about the weather, and she kept thinking, did he not hear me? But he did. He just did not feel the urgency to respond, because her pain did not create discomfort in him. It was information, not experience. And so he filed it away and moved on. This is what callousness looks like in relationships. Not malice, not neglect, just a flat emotional response to your distress. They are not trying to hurt you. They are just not moved by your hurt. And over time, that flattens you too, because you start to wonder, am I overreacting? If they are not concerned, maybe I should not be either, and you shrink your own feelings to match their indifference. One researcher called this emotional muting. The partner of someone high in psychopathy often learns to suppress their own emotions, not because they are told to, but because expressing them yields nothing. No response, no validation, no change. And so they stop. They become smaller, quieter, until one day they realize, I have disappeared. Not because they were broken, but because the relationship had no room for them. Here is the painful truth. Callousness is not personal. They are not withholding empathy from you specifically. They withhold it from everyone. It is structural, neurological, a different wiring that processes emotion differently. But that does not make it acceptable, because you deserve to be with someone who feels your pain, who is moved by it, who adjusts because of it. And if they cannot give that, it is not a relationship. It is a performance of one. Notice where your body feels warm, where it feels cool. Just observe. No need to change anything. You are allowed to need what you need, even if they cannot give it. Chapter 20. Moral disengagement. inner lawyer. There is a mechanism that allows people to harm without guilt. It is called moral disengagement, and everyone uses it sometimes. You cut someone off in traffic, but they were driving too slow anyway. You lie on your taxes. But the system is rigged. You hurt someone with your words, but they hurt you first. These are justifications. They allow you to act in ways that contradict your values without feeling bad. For most people, moral disengagement is occasional, a coping mechanism when the dissonance becomes too loud. But for people high in Dark Triad traits, it is constant. It is how they navigate the world. Albert Bandura, a psychologist who studied this, identified 8 strategies people use to disengage morally, and people high in narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy use all of them, fluently, automatically, without even realizing they are doing it. The first strategy is moral justification, reframing harmful behavior as serving a higher cause. I lied to protect you. I had to be harsh. It was for your own good. I am just being honest. The harm becomes noble, necessary, and guilt cannot attach to necessity. The second strategy is euphemistic labeling, softening the language to soften the act. I did not lie. I just did not tell you everything. I did not manipulate. I just guided the conversation. I did not cheat. I just explored my options. I did not cheat. The words make the harm disappear. The third strategy is advantageous comparison, comparing your behavior to something worse. At least I did not. Other people do way worse. You are upset about this? You should see what X did. Suddenly your harm is minor, forgivable, nothing. The fourth strategy is displacement of responsibility, blaming circumstances, authority, pressure. I had no choice. You made me do this. Anyone in my position would have done the same. The harm is no longer yours. It belongs to the situation. The fifth strategy is diffusion of responsibility, spreading the blame so thin it disappears. Everyone was doing it. It was a group decision. I was just following orders. No one is responsible, so no one is guilty. The sixth strategy is distorting consequences, minimizing the harm. It is not a big deal. You are overreacting. You will get over it. If the harm is small, guilt is unnecessary. The seventh strategy is dehumanization, reducing the victim to something less than human. They are just being dramatic. They are too sensitive. They always do this. If the victim is not fully human, their pain is not fully real. The eighth strategy is attribution of blame, flipping the script entirely. You provoked me. If you had not X, I would not have Y. This is your fault. The victim becomes the perpetrator, and the perpetrator becomes the victim. People high in Dark Triad traits do not sit with guilt. because they have an arsenal of tools to deflect it, and they deploy those tools reflexively, not consciously, not maliciously, but automatically, because guilt is unbearable, and the inner lawyer is always ready to defend. Let your jaw soften. Let the tension in your face release. This is not about condemning them. It is about understanding the system, so you stop accepting the justifications. Chapter 21: Rationalizations that work. The most effective lies are the ones the liar believes, and people high in Dark Triad traits are masters of self-deception. They do not see themselves as harmful. They see themselves as realistic, strategic, honest, and the gap between their behavior and their self-image is bridged by rationalizations. Here is how it works. A narcissist insults you. You express hurt. And instead of apologizing, they say, "I am just being honest. You are too sensitive." To them, this is true. They genuinely believe they are doing you a favor by pointing out your flaws. And your reaction is proof that you cannot handle truth. This is not a lie. It is a rationalization that has become their reality. A Machiavellian person manipulates you. You notice the pattern and confront them, and they say, "I was protecting you. You would not have understood if I had told you the truth." To them, this is accurate. They were managing information, controlling outcomes. And that is not manipulation, that is leadership. The rationalization reshapes the narrative. A psychopath harms you and shows no remorse. You ask how they can be so calm, and they say, "What happened, happened. Dwelling on it does not help anyone." To them, this is pragmatic. Guilt is unproductive. Apologies are performative. They have already moved on. And you should too. The rationalization erases the harm. And here is the difficult part. These rationalizations work, not just for them, for you, because they are delivered with such conviction, such clarity, such certainty, that you start to doubt your own perception. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe they were trying to help. Maybe I am the one holding on to something I should release. And slowly, their reality becomes yours. Not because you agree with it, but because arguing with it is exhausting. And at a certain point, it is easier to accept their version than to keep defending your own. One researcher described this as reality negotiation. In every relationship, there are two versions of reality, yours and theirs. And the person with the most confidence wins. Not because their version is true, but because confidence erodes doubt, and people high in Dark Triad traits have unshakable confidence because they have spent a lifetime building rationalizations, each one reinforcing the next, until they live in a self-constructed world where they are always right, always justified, always misunderstood, and anyone who challenges that world is the enemy. Here is a small story. A man once told me about his father. His father hurt people consistently, predictably, but if you asked him, he was the victim. The world was unfair. People were ungrateful. No one understood him. And he believed it, not because he was delusional, but because he had spent decades rationalizing every harm into evidence of his own suffering, and by the end, the narrative was seamless. He was not the problem. The world was. This is the power of rationalization. It turns the perpetrator into the victim, and the victim into the perpetrator. And once that inversion is complete, guilt becomes impossible, because victims do not owe apologies. They deserve them. Notice the air moving through your body. In, out, steady, reliable. You do not need to accept their version of reality, even if they believe it. Chapter 22. Splitting. All good, all bad. There is a defense mechanism called splitting. It is the inability to hold two truths at once, to see someone as both good and flawed, to see a situation as both difficult and worthwhile. Splitting creates a binary, all good or all bad, no middle ground. And people high in Dark Triad traits, especially narcissists, split constantly. When you reflect them well, you are perfect, amazing, the best, irreplaceable. But the moment you disappoint them, you flip, worthless, terrible, a mistake. And the shift is instant. No gradual cooling, no nuanced reassessment, just a complete inversion. One woman described it with her ex-partner. One day, she was his soulmate. The next, she was toxic. What changed? She set a boundary, a small one, reasonable, but to him, it was a betrayal, because in his mind, she was supposed to be perfect. And perfect people do not have needs that conflict with his, so she must not be perfect, which means she is the opposite. And once the split happens, there is no going back. Every good memory is rewritten. I always knew something was off. I should have seen this coming. You never really cared. The past is erased, the present is vilified, and the future is discarded. This is what makes relationships with people high in Dark Triad traits so unstable, because you are not a person to them. You are a mirror, and mirrors are either flawless or shattered. There is no in-between. Splitting serves a purpose. It protects the narcissist's self-image. If you are bad, then your criticism does not matter. If you are wrong, then they do not have to change. If you are the problem, then they remain perfect. The split preserves the illusion, but for you, it is devastating. Because you are being discarded, not for who you are, but for failing to remain an idealized version they invented. And there is no defense, no argument, no apology, no repair. Because once the split happens, you are no longer human, You are a symbol of disappointment, of threat, of everything they refuse to face in themselves. One researcher described splitting as a way of avoiding complexity because complexity requires nuance, and nuance requires the ability to sit with discomfort, to hold the reality that someone you love can also hurt you, that someone you admire can also disappoint you, that you, yourself, can be both good and flawed. But people high in Dark Triad traits cannot sit with that. It is too destabilizing, and so they split the world into categories: good and bad, ally and enemy, perfect and worthless, and they move through life never integrating the middle. Let your shoulders drop again. Let the weight of your arms release. You were never the problem. You were just the person who stopped being the solution. Chapter 23. Projection. Borrowed darkness. Projection is when you take what you cannot face in yourself and place it onto someone else. It is a defense mechanism. Universal, human, we all do it sometimes. You feel jealous, but accuse someone else of jealousy. You feel controlling, but call someone else controlling. It is easier to see the flaw outside than inside. But people high in Dark Triad traits project constantly and with force because they cannot integrate their own darkness, their own selfishness, their own cruelty, their own manipulation, and so they disown it and place it onto you. One man described this with his ex-wife. She cheated, and when he found out, she did not apologize. She accused him of cheating with absolute conviction. No evidence, no logic, just projection. She could not sit with her own betrayal, so she borrowed his innocence and made him the villain. This is what projection does. It inverts reality. The narcissist who is self-obsessed accuses you of being self-obsessed. The Machiavellian who manipulates accuses you of manipulation. The psychopath who is callous accuses you of being cold. And because they deliver these accusations with such certainty, you start to doubt, am I selfish? Am I manipulative? Am I the cold one? And while you are busy defending yourself, they escape scrutiny. This is the function of projection. It is a deflection, a way to avoid looking inward, by making you look inward instead. One researcher described projection as exporting your shadow. Jung talked about the shadow, the parts of yourself you cannot accept. Most people try to integrate the shadow, to acknowledge it, to work with it. But people high in Dark Triad traits do not integrate. They export. They find someone else to carry it. And once they place it onto you, they believe it. It is not a lie. It is a transfer. They genuinely see in you what they refuse to see in themselves, and they punish you for it. One woman described being called controlling by a partner who monitored her phone, her schedule, her friendships. He controlled everything, but he could not see it because, in his mind, she was the controlling one. She wanted too much, expected too much, demanded too much, and he was just responding. The projection was complete, and she found herself defending her need for basic autonomy, while he framed himself as the victim of her expectations. This is the cruelty of projection. It does not just distort reality, it makes you question your own sanity. Because the accusations are so confident, so detailed, so specific, that part of you wonders, is there truth in this? And that wondering is the wound. Let your hands rest. Let the air move through you. You are not what they say you are. You are what you know yourself to be. Chapter 24, Masking, the social costume. People high in Dark Triad traits are not always obvious. In fact, they are often charming, likable, successful, admired, because they have learned to mask. Masking is the ability to perform normalcy, to suppress the traits that would alienate others, and to amplify the traits that attract. It is not lying exactly. It is strategic self-presentation, and people high in Dark Triad traits are experts. They study social norms. They learn what people respond to: warmth, humor, humility, empathy, and they perform them, not because they feel them, but because they work. One man described meeting his boss for the first time: friendly, approachable, asked about his family. He thought, this is a good person. But over time, the mask slipped. The friendliness was conditional. The questions were data collection. The warmth was a strategy. And once he was no longer useful, the warmth disappeared. Not dramatically, just gone, like a light switching off. This is what masking looks like. A performance so convincing, even the performer sometimes believes it. But beneath the mask, the traits remain. The lack of empathy, the manipulation, the callousness. They are just hidden, carefully, skillfully, until the mask is no longer needed. And then the real person emerges. Not cruel, not monstrous, just indifferent, using people as tools, discarding them when they are no longer useful, and moving on without a second thought. One researcher described this as social chameleonism, the ability to become whoever the situation requires. For people high in Machiavellianism, this is instinctive. They read the room, adapt, perform, and they do it so well you never see the calculation. You just see someone who gets you, who understands, who cares. But the understanding is tactical. The care is conditional. And the moment you stop serving their goals, the performance ends. Here is the difficult truth. You cannot detect masking in the early stages because it is designed to be undetectable. The charm is real enough. The interest is real enough. It is only over time that the pattern reveals itself. When the mask slips, when the effort fades, when the performance costs more than it is worth. And by then, you are already invested, already attached, already hoping, and the unmasking feels like betrayal. But it is not betrayal. It is revelation. You are just seeing what was always there, hidden beneath a performance you were never meant to see through. Notice the weight of your body again. Feel it resting, supported. You are not naive for believing the mask. You are human, and humans are wired to trust. Chapter 25, The Cycle, Idealize, Use, Discard. There is a pattern that repeats in relationships with people high in Dark Triad traits, especially narcissists. It is called the cycle, and it has 3 phases: idealize, use, discard. The first phase is intoxicating. They see you, truly see you. They ask questions, remember details, make you feel special, like you are the only person in the world who matters. This is not entirely fake. They are genuinely fascinated because you are new, unexplored, full of potential, and newness feels like intensity, which feels like love. But it is not love. It is idealization. They are not seeing you. They are seeing a version of you that serves their needs. A mirror, a validation source, a solution to their emptiness. And as long as you reflect that version, the intensity continues. But then, slowly, the second phase begins. Use. You are no longer new. You are known, predictable, and the fascination fades. Not suddenly, gradually. They stop asking questions. They stop remembering details. They stop making you feel special. And instead, they start taking your time, your energy, your resources. Not overtly, subtly. A favor here, a compromise there. And you give. Because you remember the intensity. And you keep hoping it will return, but it does not, because the idealization phase was never about you. It was about them. And now they have extracted what they needed. Your admiration, your stability, your willingness to adapt. And the third phase arrives. Discard. Not always dramatic. Sometimes it is a slow fade. They stop calling, stop texting, stop showing up, and you are left wondering, what did I do wrong? But you did nothing wrong. You just stopped being useful. And without utility, you have no value to them. So they move on to the next person, the next intensity, the next idealization, and the cycle begins again. One woman described this cycle with her ex-partner. 3 months of magic, 6 months of slow erosion, 1 month of cold detachment, and then he was gone. And 6 months later, she saw him with someone new, and it looked exactly like it had with her. Same intensity, same questions, same fascination. And she realized it was never about her. It was a pattern, and she was just one iteration. This is the cruelty of the cycle. It makes you believe you were special, and then it makes you believe you were not. But the truth is simpler. You were neither. You were just the person available when they needed reflection, and when they did not, you were irrelevant. Let your jaw soften. Let the muscles in your neck release. You were not replaced. You were never held. Chapter 26. Control. Attention, money, time. Control is the silent goal in relationships with people high in Dark Triad traits. Not physical control. Psychological control. The ability to shape your reality, your choices, your sense of self. And they do it through 3 channels: attention, money, time. First, attention control. They train you to seek their approval by giving it inconsistently. One day, they are warm, engaged, present. The next, they are cold, distant, unavailable, and you do not know what changed. So you start trying to figure it out. What did I do? What did I say? How do I get the warmth back? And in that trying, you become focused on them. Your attention shifts from your own needs to their moods. And that is control, not through force, through variable reinforcement. The same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. One researcher described it as intermittent reward. If the reward came every time, you would relax. If it never came, you would leave. But when it comes sometimes, unpredictably, you stay. And you keep trying, because the reward is possible, and the effort feels worth it. Until one day you realize you have spent years chasing warmth that was never yours to earn. Second, financial control. They do not always control money overtly. Sometimes it is subtle. They borrow, they take, they forget to repay, or they position themselves as the provider, the one who handles finances, who makes decisions. And slowly you lose autonomy, because financial decisions require their approval, and approval is conditional on your compliance, your gratitude, your deference. One man described this with his ex-partner. She insisted on managing the accounts for efficiency, she said. But over time, he needed permission to spend on anything, even his own money. And when he questioned it, she made him feel unreasonable. I am just trying to help us stay organized. The control was framed as care, and he accepted it, until he realized he had lost the ability to make choices. Without her approval, nothing moved. And that was not partnership. It was captivity. Third, time control. They monopolize your time, not by asking directly, but by creating crises, drama, emergencies, needs that require you to drop everything. And you do, because caring means showing up. But over time, you notice the crises are always theirs, and your needs are always postponed. One woman described this pattern. Her partner always had something urgent: a fight with a friend, a work disaster, a family issue, and she showed up every time. But when she needed support, he was busy, or tired, or stressed, and she found herself apologizing for needing him, because his needs always came first, and that was control, not through rules, through priority. Their needs were always more urgent, and yours were always negotiable, and over time you forget what your needs even are, because you have spent so long managing theirs. Notice the air moving through you: cool, warm, steady. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have needs. And if someone makes you feel otherwise, that is not love. It is control. Chapter 27, Boundaries, the Quiet Shield. A boundary is not a wall. It is a statement of what you will and will not accept. And people high in Dark Triad traits hate boundaries, not because they are controlling, but because boundaries interrupt their strategies. When you set a boundary, you are saying, this far, no further. And that limit challenges their ability to manipulate, to charm, to take. So they push back, not always aggressively, sometimes with hurt. I thought you trusted me, sometimes with confusion. I do not understand why this is such a big deal, sometimes with guilt. After everything I have done for you, this is how you treat me? These are not responses. They are tactics designed to make you retract the boundary, to apologize for having needs, to shrink back into compliance. And if you do, the pattern continues. But if you hold the boundary, something shifts. They either respect it and adapt, or they leave. And both outcomes tell you something important. If they respect it, there is potential for a real relationship. If they leave, there never was. Because real relationships can hold boundaries. Manipulation cannot. One woman described setting a boundary with her partner. She said, "I need us to talk before you make plans that involve me." A simple request. And he responded with fury. "You are trying to control me. You do not trust me. This is ridiculous." The boundary was framed as an attack, and she almost retracted it. But instead, she held it, and he left. Not immediately, but eventually. Because the boundary made her less useful, less pliable, less controllable, and he did not want a partner. He wanted compliance. This is the function of boundaries. They filter, they separate the people who can handle your autonomy from the people who need your submission. And sometimes that filtering is painful, because you realize the person you loved was only there as long as you stayed small. But that pain is also clarity, and clarity is freedom. Here is what healthy boundaries look like. They are calm, clear, consistent. They do not require justification. or apology or negotiation. They are simply statements. I need space when I am upset. I need space. I need space. I need space. I need space when I am upset. I will not accept being yelled at. I expect honesty, and when someone crosses them, you enforce, not with anger, with action. You leave the room. You end the conversation. You distance yourself until the boundary is respected or the relationship ends. And both are acceptable outcomes, because you are not responsible for making someone respect you. You are responsible for respecting yourself. Let your hands rest where they are. Let your breath slow. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no. And anyone who makes you feel otherwise is showing you exactly why the boundary was necessary. Chapter 28. Red Flags, Subtle Early Signals. Most people do not recognize Dark Triad traits early, because the early signs are subtle and easily explained away. But looking back, they were there. Here are the signals most people miss. Signal 1, love bombing, intense attention, grand gestures, rapid intimacy. It feels like connection, but it is actually mirroring. They are learning you fast, so they can become what you need. And once they have, the intensity fades. Signal 2, inconsistency. They are warm one day, cold the next. Present, then absent, and you cannot find the pattern, because there is no pattern. They show up when it serves them, and disappear when it does not. Signal 3, subtle blame. They never take responsibility. It is always circumstances, other people, bad luck. My ex was crazy. My boss does not get me. Everyone always lets me down. And you think they have been unlucky. But unluckiness is not the common thread. They are. Signal 4, testing boundaries early. They ask for a favor, a small one, and if you say yes, the asks get bigger. And if you say no, they sulk, or guilt you, or withdraw. They are testing, how much will you give? And the answer shapes how they treat you. Signal 5, charm without depth. They are entertaining, funny, magnetic. But the conversation never goes deep. They do not ask meaningful questions. They do not share meaningful things. It is all surface, because depth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trust, which they do not feel. Signal 6, discomfort you cannot name. You feel uneasy, but you cannot explain why. They have not done anything wrong, but something feels off. Trust that feeling. It is your nervous system picking up signals your conscious mind is not yet processing. One woman described this. She met someone who seemed perfect, kind, successful, attentive, but she felt tense around him, and she ignored it, because everything on the surface looked right, and she thought, I am just anxious. But 6 months later, the mask slipped, and she realized her body knew first. Signal 7, triangulation early. They mention exes, often, or other people who want them, not to brag, but to create competition, to make you feel if I do not step up, someone else will. And that urgency keeps you compliant, because you are afraid of losing them to someone better. Signal 8, moving too fast. They want commitment quickly, to move in, to merge lives, to make plans. And you think they are just excited. But speed is a strategy. The faster you commit, the less time you have to notice red flags. And once you are invested, it is harder to leave. Signal 9, isolated compliments. They compliment you, but only when no one else is around. In public, they diminish you. Subtly, a joke, a correction, a comment that makes you seem less, because public admiration would elevate you, and they need you lower. Signal 10, your instinct says wait. You want to trust them, but something says not yet. Listen to that, because it is protection, not paranoia. Let your body rest. Let the tension soften. You are not overthinking. You are noticing. And noticing is wisdom. Chapter 29, Recovery. Nervous system reset. Leaving a relationship with someone high in Dark Triad traits is not just emotional, it is physiological. Your nervous system has been in survival mode, hypervigilant, reactive, braced, and even after you leave, the body remembers. It expects the next betrayal, the next manipulation, the next discard, and so it stays on guard. This is not weakness. This is biology. Your nervous system learned that safety is conditional. That warmth can disappear. That love can invert. And those lessons do not disappear just because the relationship ended. Recovery is about teaching your body a new lesson, that safety is possible, that you can trust yourself again, that not everyone operates the way they did. One woman described this. She left a narcissistic partner, and for months afterward, she jumped at texts. Her heart raced when someone asked to talk. She scanned every conversation for hidden meaning, because her body was still expecting attack, even though the threat was gone. This is what trauma does. It keeps the alarm system activated long after the danger has passed. And recovery is about gently turning the alarm down, not by force, by practice. Here is what helps. First, somatic awareness, reconnecting with your body. Because during the relationship, you learn to override your body's signals. You felt uneasy, but you stayed. You felt exhausted, but you gave more. You felt afraid, but you minimized it. And now you need to relearn. Your body is wise. When it says stop, you stop. When it says rest, you rest. When it says no, you trust it. Second, grounding practices. Not meditation, not therapy, just small moments of presence, feeling your feet on the floor, noticing your breath, letting tension release without fixing it. These moments teach your nervous system you are here, you are safe, you are enough. Third, reclaiming your narrative. During the relationship, they rewrote your story. Your needs were too much. Your feelings were wrong. Your perceptions were invalid. And now you need to reclaim the truth. What happened was real. What you felt was valid. What you experienced was not your fault. This is not about blame. It is about clarity. So you stop gaslighting yourself on their behalf. Fourth, safe connections, not new relationships. Just people who see you, who do not need you to perform, who let you be messy, uncertain, healing. These connections teach your nervous system. Not everyone takes. Some people give, and that relearning is slow, but it is possible. One man described this. After leaving a Machiavellian partner, he avoided relationships for a year, not out of fear, out of care. He needed to remember who he was without someone shaping him. And slowly, he did. He started trusting his instincts again, saying no without guilt, feeling his feelings without apologizing. And one day he realized, I am whole again. Not because someone fixed him, but because he stopped letting someone break him. Notice the rise and fall of your chest, the rhythm, the ease. You are healing. Not because you are doing it perfectly, but because you are doing it. Chapter 30, Integration, Clarity without Fear. Understanding the Dark Triad is not about fear. It is about clarity. The clarity to see patterns, to recognize traits, to protect yourself without paranoia, and to move through the world with wisdom instead of suspicion. Because not everyone high in these traits is dangerous. Some are aware, some are managing it, some are trying, and some contexts reward these traits. A surgeon who can detach, a CEO who can make hard calls, a soldier who can act without hesitation. Low empathy is not always harmful. It is context-dependent. But in intimate relationships, these traits create harm because intimacy requires vulnerability, reciprocity, depth, emotional presence. And those are the very things people high in Dark Triad traits struggle with. So the question is not, are they bad? The question is, can this relationship meet my needs? And if the answer is no, that is not a judgment. It is a boundary. One researcher described it this way: you do not hate water for being wet. You just do not build your home in the ocean. And you do not hate people high in Dark Triad traits for being wired differently. You just do not build your life around them. Here is what integration looks like. You recognize the charm, but you wait to see the follow-through. You notice the intensity, but you ask, is this sustainable? You feel the pull to give, but you check, am I giving out of care or out of fear? And you trust yourself, not perfectly, not immediately, but progressively. One step, one boundary, one choice at a time, until the day you realize, I see clearly now, and I am no longer afraid. One woman described this moment. She met someone new, and within weeks she saw the patterns, the love bombing, the mirroring, the subtle tests, and instead of ignoring it, she said, "This is not for me," and she walked away. Not with anger, not with drama, just with clarity, because she knew what she needed, and she knew this person could not give it, and that knowing was not cold. It was kind to herself. This is what wisdom looks like, not cynicism, not hardness, just discernment, the ability to see what is and to choose accordingly. Let your body settle. Let your breath slow. You have walked through the dark, and you have come out with something precious, not bitterness, clarity, not fear, wisdom, and that is enough. You are enough.